morning my sister found out who had been depositing money into my account every week for 3 months. She called me 17 times before noon. I didn't answer. I was sitting in a physical therapy waiting room in Portland, watching rain streak down the glass, counting the ways a person can disappear from their own life without anyone noticing until the money stops. My name is Cassie. I'm 31. I worked as a forensic accountant for a mid-sized firm downtown, the kind of job that sounds impressive at dinner parties until someone asks what you actually do and you have to explain that you spend most of your time finding the things someone else is trying to hide. The irony of that didn't hit me until much later. In my family, my brother was the story. Shane, 27, 6 feet of easy confidence and a laugh that made strangers trust him immediately. He'd been chasing a music career since he dropped out of college at 19. My parents talked about it like a calling, like the world owed him a stage because he wanted one badly enough. My mother bought him his first real recording equipment. My father co-signed his apartment lease twice. Nobody asked me if that was okay. Nobody had me if that was okay. I had a salary. I had a plan. In my family, that made me a resource, not a person. It started the way it always starts, which is slowly, which is the reason you don't see it. My mother called me 3 years ago on a Tuesday in February. Her voice was the careful kind, the kind she used when she needed something and knew I might say no. Shane's studio time fell through, she said. He had a producer interested, a real one, and he needed to rebook immediately or lose a slot. Could I cover it? Just this once. $600. I covered it. Then it was the car repair. Then the rent gap. Then my father's back surgery copay. My parents were on my father's insurance through his union, but the deductible that year was brutal, and my mother said they didn't want to touch their savings. I remember thinking that sentence was strange. I didn't have savings anymore. I'd been quietly spending mine on them for 2 years by then. The number, when I finally added it up 18 months ago on a Thursday night at my kitchen table with a glass of wine I didn't finish, was $74,000. Over 4 years. I had a spreadsheet because of course I did. I work in forensic accounting. I see money trails for a living. I just hadn't thought to look at my own. I didn't confront them. I told myself I was waiting for the right time. The right time never came because I kept finding reasons it wasn't right yet. My father's blood pressure, Shane's big opportunity, my mother's anxiety. I got very good at choosing their comfort over my own honesty. The collapse didn't announce itself. That's the part people don't understand. They imagine some dramatic final straw. For me, it was a Wednesday in March. I was finishing a deadline audit, the kind where you've been staring at spreadsheets for so long, the numbers start to swim. My shoulders had been hurting for weeks. I'd stopped eating real meals somewhere in February because cooking felt like effort I couldn't locate. I was running on drive-through coffee and the particular adrenaline of someone who hasn't slept enough in so long they've forgotten what enough feels like. I stood up from my desk to get water. My left hand went numb first. Then my vision narrowed from the edges inward, like someone drawing the curtain slowly. I remember thinking, that's strange. And then I remember the flow. I woke up in the hospital. The ceiling was that specific shade of institutional white, the kind that's designed to be inoffensive and manages to be deeply unsettling instead. There was an IV in my arm. My head felt packed with something thick and slow. A monitor beeped steadily beside me, the kind of sound that means you're being watched over, which should feel reassuring and sometimes doesn't. I turned my head to the left. The chair beside my bed was empty. There was no coat draped over the arm, no bag shoved under it, no half-finished coffee cup on the side table. Just the chair. A nurse came in a few minutes later. Young, dark-haired, efficient in the way of someone who's learned to work around other people's belief. She introduced herself as Tara. My voice came out wrong, like a door that needed oil. My family, I said. Tara paused. Just briefly. They were notified, she said. I waited. She adjusted something on my IV line. Your mother called back about 40 minutes after we reached her. Called back. I repeated those 2 words in my head. Not came, called back. And Tara's face stayed professionally gentle. She said they'd come as soon as they could. That was yesterday morning. I stared at the ceiling. Yesterday. She said your brother had a performance scheduled, Tara said carefully, and then stopped, like she was deciding how much to tell me. Your father said you'd understand. I did understand. That was the worst part. I understood completely. Shane had a show in Nashville, a 3-night run at a mid-size venue that my parents had driven down to attend. It had been on the family calendar for 2 months. My mother had bought a new dress for it. My father had taken 3 days off work. None of that was wrong in isolation. People go to their kids' shows. That's normal. The part that wasn't normal was that I was lying in a hospital bed with a cardiac event flag in my chart and a blood pressure reading that had made the ER doctor use the word serious. And my family's response was to call back 40 minutes later and say they'd come when they could. When I asked Tara what had actually happened to me, she explained it in plain terms: severe stress-induced hypertension compounded by exhaustion and what was probably a vasovagal episode when I stood up. My body had been sending signals for months. I'd been fluent in ignoring them. You're lucky a co-worker saw you fall, she said. They got to you fast. Lucky. I lay with that word for a while. It didn't fit right. They gave me a room on the second floor. The window faced a parking garage, but there was a strip of sky above it, and I watched the light change through that strip across 3 days, waiting. My parents texted. My mother sent a string of hearts. My father sent, "Hope you're feeling better, rest up." Shane sent a voice memo that was mostly background noise and him saying, "Hey sis, mom said you fainted. That's scary. Let me know if you need anything," and then a notification sound like he'd gotten a text and the message ended. None of them came. On the second night, I couldn't sleep. It was around 11. The hall lights dimmed to that soft overnight setting. Tara was doing her rounds. I asked her, mostly because the silence was getting loud, whether I'd had any visitors. She looked at me in a way that felt like a question she was deciding whether to ask. Then she said yes, actually. I waited. Not family, she said. A man. He came the first evening, around 7. He asked which room you were in and then she paused. He sat in the hall, outside your door, for a couple of hours. I didn't say anything. He's been back each night, she said. He doesn't ask to come in. He just sits out there for a while and then leaves. What does he look like? She described him. Tall, older, maybe early 60s, grey at the temples. He always brought coffee from the place across the street, she said, but he never seemed to drink it. He just held it. I didn't know who that was. I genuinely didn't. I ran through every person I could think of who might show up at a hospital for me and sit outside a door for hours without asking anything in return, and I came up empty. What's his name? I asked. Tara shook her head. He hasn't said. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay in the hospital bed listening to the building breathe around me and thought about a man I couldn't identify sitting in a hallway with a coffee he didn't drink, choosing to be near a person who didn't know he was there. My family arrived on day 3, not together. My mother came first, around 2 in the afternoon, still wearing the earrings she'd bought for Nashville. She smelled like the hotel shampoo she always used when they traveled, something floral and expensive. She hugged me carefully, like I was a thing that might bleak or stain. "There you are," she said. "How are you feeling?" I looked at her. 3 days, I said. Her expression shifted just slightly. The airport was a mess getting back, and your father's knee has been bad. 3 days, I said again, not louder. Just again. She sat down in the chair beside my bed, the one that had been empty for 72 hours. She smoothed her pants. She asked about the doctors, the medication, when I could go home. She did not ask about the monitor beside my bed or what the doctor had actually said or whether I'd been scared waking up alone in a hospital room with no one there. When my father came in an hour later, he looked around the room the way he always did when he entered a space, assessing it, and then looked at me like I was a situation to be managed. His first question was whether I told my employer yet and whether that would affect my leave policy. My jaw tightened. "Hi, Dad. I'm just asking," he said. "You don't want to lose standing with them." I'd been in the hospital for 3 days. His concern was my standing with my employer. Shane didn't come that day. He sent my mother a text that she read aloud to me. Tell Cassie I'll come see her when she's home and more comfortable. Hospitals weird me out. My mother nodded, like this was reasonable. I looked at the strip of sky above the parking garage and said nothing. The man came again that night. I saw him this time. I was awake, sitting up, unable to stop running numbers in my head, the way I always do when I'm anxious, when I saw a figure pause at the glass panel beside my door. Tall, grey at the temples. He stood there for a moment, looking in, and when he saw I was awake, he didn't move away. He raised a hand slightly. Not a wave, exactly. More like an acknowledgement. I raised mine back. He sat down in the hallway chair and stayed for 2 hours. I could see the outline of him through the glass. He didn't look at his phone. He just sat there, steady and quiet, like sitting outside a stranger's hospital room at midnight was a perfectly ordinary thing to do. In the morning, I asked Tara to send him in if he came back. He did. That evening, he stayed near the doorway, the way people do when they're not sure of their welcome. He was older than I'd thought from the hallway, or maybe just more tired. He had the kind of face that had been through something and come out the other side still standing. I'm Cassie, I said. I know, he said. I'm Frank. The name didn't place him. I'm sorry, I said. How do you know me? He was quiet for a moment, not evasively, more like he was deciding how to hold something carefully. He looked at his hands, then at me. I knew your mother, he said, a long time ago, before you were born. Something in the air in the room changed. How long before? I asked. He looked at me steadily. Long enough. I held his gaze. My pulse ticked up. The monitor registered it. He glanced at it, then back at me, and there was something in his face I hadn't expected to see. Not guilt. Something older than guilt. Why are you here? I said. And I meant it the real way, not just the polite way. He said, because I found out you were here alone and I couldn't. He stopped, started again. Because I should have been findable sooner. I didn't fully understand that sentence yet, but I understood enough to not look away. He came back the next day and the day after that. We talked in the way people do when they're filling in years at a time, carefully, watching each other's faces. He told me he'd been living in Portland for 6 years. He told me he'd seen my name in a professional directory. He didn't explain why he'd been looking, and I didn't ask yet, because some questions need a bigger container than a hospital room. On day 6, I asked him directly. He told me. My mother had been with him for 2 years before she met my father. There had been a pregnancy. She had told him it ended. She had moved, changed her number, and 3 years later she'd married my father in a small ceremony in her hometown in Ohio. Frank had spent 18 years assuming that the pregnancy she'd described had not produced a child. He found out otherwise 11 months ago. I won't say how. Some of that belongs to him. The information landed in me the way large things do. Not all at once, but in sections, the way you hear a tree fall and keep hearing it even after the sound stops. I'm not sure what I am to you yet, he said. I just know I couldn't find out you were here and not come. I stared at the ceiling for a while. The monitor beeped. Outside the window, Portland went on being Portland. Grey and wet and indifferent. Why didn't you come in? I finally said. The first night, he looked down. I didn't know if you knew. I didn't know if you'd want me there. Something cracked open in my chest. Not painfully. More like a window. You sat outside a glass door for 3 nights, I said, because you didn't know if you were allowed in. He nodded once. I thought about my mother who had arrived on day 3 smelling like hotel shampoo. I thought about my father asking about my leave policy. I thought about Shane's voice memo with the notification sound cutting him off. I thought about $74,000 and 4 years and the spreadsheet I'd made at my kitchen table with the unfinished wine. You should have come in, I said. His jaw moved. I know that now. My family came again on day 7, together this time. My mother and father and Shane, who looked around the room with the slightly uncomfortable expression of someone visiting an obligation. He brought flowers. They were the kind you buy at a gas station, still wrapped in plastic. Frank was sitting in the chair beside my bed. My mother stopped in the doorway. Her face did something complicated that I had never seen it do before. It went still in the way of a person who has just walked into the past they built a life trying to outrun. "What is he doing here?" she said. It came out flat, not a question. My father looked between her and Frank with the expression of a man who has just realized he doesn't have full information. Frank said nothing. He looked at me. I looked at my mother. "How long?" I said. Her chin lifted. "Cassie, how long have you known he was in Portland?" The silence that followed was its own answer. It stretched long enough to confirm what I'd already half formed in my mind. "He reached out," she finally said, "last year." I didn't respond. "And you didn't tell me," I said. Her voice sharpened. "I was protecting you." "From what?" "From disruption," she said. "From confusion. You have a family. You don't need." "What?" I said. "The extra person who actually showed up?" Her face flushed. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know I was here for 6 days," I said, "and you came on day 3. She opened her mouth. "I know Shane sent a voice memo," I said. "And Dad asked about my leave policy." My father started. "I was worried about your—" I held up a hand. "I'm not doing this here." Shane shifted his weight. He was still holding the gas station flowers. "Look," he said, "nobody knew it was going to be that serious." "You knew I was in the hospital with a cardiac flag," I said. "The hospital called Mom within the hour." "It wasn't a—" he started. "Shane," I said. "Stop." He stopped. I looked at my mother. She was watching Frank with an expression I could only describe as something between fear and fury. The expression of someone who has lost control of a story they'd been telling for 31 years. "He paid my medical bills," I said. She already knew that. Tara had told me the billing department received an anonymous payment earlier that week. Frank had confirmed it when I asked him directly. My mother's voice went cold. "That's not appropriate." "No," I said. "You know what's not appropriate? 4 years of being the family emergency fund. $74,000, Mom. I did the math." Her expression flickered. "I have a spreadsheet," I said. "I work in forensic accounting. I should have looked at my own numbers sooner." My father's jaw tightened. "That money was for the family." "I know," I said. "I was the only one treating it that way." "Cassie," my mother said, and her voice shifted into the register she used when she was trying to regain control, the one that was softer and somehow more dangerous. "We'll talk about this at home. Come home and we'll—" "I changed my emergency contact," I said. She blinked. 2 days ago. I asked the hospital administrator. "You're not listed anymore." Her face drained of something. "You can't make medical decisions for me anymore," I said, "or financial ones. I also called my bank this morning." She looked at me like I was someone she didn't recognize. "Maybe I was. I closed the joint account," I said, "the one you and Shane had access to. I canceled the automatic transfer. The account you used for the property tax loan last fall is closed." The room was very quiet. My father said, "Cassie, you owe us some basic." I looked at him. "I've given you $74,000, Dad. We're settled." Shane's face had gone strange. He was still holding the flowers. He set them down on the windowsill behind him, and the plastic rustled, and nobody said anything. My mother turned to Frank. "This is your doing." Frank looked at her. "I'm going to let her speak for herself." She looked back at me, and for a moment I saw it. Not the anger, not the calculation. Just something scared and very old. She'd built a version of our family around a story that wasn't entirely true. And now the story was standing in the room, and so was I, and neither of us was going anywhere. "You're making a mistake," she said. "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe I've been making one for 4 years and I'm correcting it." She left first. My father followed. Shane paused at the door and looked at me with something on his face that might have been the beginning of understanding, or might have been discomfort. He said he'd call me. He didn't. When the door closed, the room was different, quieter in a way that felt like breathing room. I stared at the ceiling for a long time. Tara came in to check my vitals. She glanced at the gas station flowers on the windowsill and said nothing. Frank sat beside my bed and didn't try to fill the silence, which was the right thing to do. I don't know what this is, I said eventually, meaning him, meaning all of it. He nodded. Me neither. I looked at him. The grey at his temples. The tired kind of face. The man who had sat outside a glass door for 3 nights with a coffee he didn't drink. You could have sent a card, I said. His mouth curved very slightly. I could have. Why didn't you? He was quiet. Then, because you deserved more than a card. I let that sit. It was a strange feeling being told you deserved something by someone who had every reason to have stayed away. I was discharged 9 days after I was admitted, on my timeline with my signature and my new emergency contact on file. The day I left, I stood at the front entrance of the hospital and breathed the outside air, which smelled like rain and exhaust and Portland in April. Frank stood nearby, hands in his jacket pockets. My phone had messages I hadn't opened. My mother. A few from a cousin who'd heard through the family chain. One from my firm's HR department about short-term disability leave, which apparently my coworker Steph had quietly initiated on my behalf while I was unconscious. I made a note to thank her. Real thanks, not the kind that's really just relief. I'm going to need time, I said to Frank. He nodded. That's fair. I'm not ready to. I stopped, restarted. I don't know what to call you yet. He looked at me. You don't have to call you Et. He looked at me. You don't have to call me anything yet. We walked to his car in the rain because he'd offered me a ride and I'd said yes because it turned out that was the kind of decision I was now allowed to make without explanation. On the way, he stopped at the coffee place across the street, the one Tara had mentioned. He ordered without asking me, handing over a cup that turned out to be exactly the kind of coffee I would have ordered myself. I didn't ask how he knew. Some things you let be what they are. A few weeks later, when I was home and sleeping real hours and eating actual meals and slowly learning to recognize my body as something that deserved maintenance, my mother called. I let it go to voicemail. She left a message that started with, I'm not angry, and ended with you don't know the whole story, which told me she was still writing a version where she was the center. I didn't call back that day. Or the next. I walked to the park near my apartment instead. The one with the big Douglas firs that make everything smell like something worth breathing. And I sat on a bench and watched a kid try to teach his dog to fetch and fail cheerfully, and I felt, for the first time in a very long time, like the weight I was carrying was mine to choose. I had a family who called back 40 minutes later. I had a father who'd spent 31 years not knowing I existed and still drove to a hospital the night he found out I was alone there. Those two things were both true. That's the thing nobody tells you about finally seeing your life clearly. It doesn't get simpler. It just gets more honest. I'm still working out what honest looks like, what I owe to whom, what I'm allowed to want without apologizing for it. Some days I still reach for the guilt, like it's a habit I haven't finished breaking. I'll catch myself calculating how much an action might cost someone else before I consider what it costs me. But then I think about a man sitting outside a glass door in a hospital hallway, not asking for anything, just refusing to let me be alone in the dark. And I think about what my mother always said. Family is who shows up. She taught me that. She just never thought it would be used against her. I've been thinking a lot lately about what it actually cost to be the reliable one. Not in money, though I know that number exactly, $74,000, give or take, over 4 years in a spreadsheet I made on a Thursday night with a glass of wine I couldn't finish. I mean the other cost. The one that doesn't show up in any account. There's a version of me that thought being needed was the same as being loved. I think a lot of people made that mistake. especially the ones who were handed responsibility early and praised for carrying it. You get good at the carrying. You get so good at it that nobody thinks to ask if you're tired, and you stop asking yourself because asking feels like failing. What happened to me in that hospital wasn't really about collapsing on a Wednesday afternoon. That was just the moment my body decided to finish a sentence my mind had been avoiding for years. The sentence was, "This is not sustainable." The body always finds a way to say the thing you've been refusing to hear. I don't think my mother is a villain. I've spent some time trying to figure out if I believe that, and I do. She made choices that protected her version of the story at the expense of mine. She built a family around a shape that required me to stay small and useful and undemanding. She probably didn't see it that way. Most people don't see the architecture they've built until someone walks out of it. What I understand now, sitting in my apartment in Portland with actual groceries in the refrigerator and actual sleep behind me, is that the people who take without asking are only able to do it as long as you let them. That's not blame. That's just the mechanics of it. I kept the account open. I kept the transfers running. I kept saying yes when I meant no, because I'd been taught that my no was a disruption and my yes was love. Untangling that takes longer than 9 days in a hospital. It takes longer than a few weeks. I'm still working on it. Frank sat outside a glass door for 3 nights. He didn't ask for anything. He didn't announce himself. He just decided that I shouldn't be alone in the dark, and then acted on that decision quietly, without making it about him. That's not a small thing. In a life where I'd been surrounded by people who made everything about themselves while calling it family, Frank's silence was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. I think about what it takes to do that. To show up for someone when you have no obligation to, when you're not sure you'll even be welcome, when the cost is entirely yours and the reward is uncertain. That takes something I want to call courage, but it's quieter than courage. It's more like integrity, doing the right thing when no one's watching and nothing's guaranteed. The morning I was discharged, I stood outside the hospital in the April rain and felt, for the first time in years, like the weight I was carrying was actually mine to choose. Not inherited, not assigned. Mine. That's the thing nobody told me about setting limits. It doesn't feel like freedom at first. It feels like loss. It feels like the guilt my mother trained me to feel, rising up right on schedule. But underneath the guilt, if you stay with it long enough, there's something else, solid ground, the kind that holds. I still don't know exactly what Frank is to me, but figuring that out slowly, which is the only honest way to figure something out. But I know what he showed me, just by sitting in a hallway with a coffee he didn't drink. He showed me what it looks like when someone decides you're worth showing up for. I'm trying to learn how to believe that about myself. It's harder than it sounds. But I think that's the real work. Not the spreadsheet, not the cancelled transfers, not the new emergency contact on file. The real work is deciding that you are worth the showing up, and then slowly building a life around people who already know that.